think people get the impression that I just turn out a book a year, one after another, but there are the ones that take a long time, and there are the ones that come quick. And I wrote a book called The Other Islanders. The subtitle is People Who Pulled Nantucket's Oars. And that's a sort of history of the working people of Nantucket. People
Ooh,
whose
I like that.
people whose ancestors did not necessarily come as the first settlers, people who weren't necessarily involved in whaling, but they contributed a great deal to our economy, our culture, and they've been kind of the unsung heroes of our public history. So I wrote that one and published it in 2005 with Spinner Publications. And then I started doing these little self-published books because there was a lot of stuff that I had accumulated in writing The Other Islanders that didn't go in the book. So the first summer after that, I did.
Let me stop you just for a second because I want to know more about The Other Islanders. Was that a book about the islanders from long ago, or was it recent? About recent people who are island.
It actually starts with the Wampanoags who were here when the English settlers got here.
Okay.
And then it has a chapter about Africans who were brought here, enslaved, manumitted, and began to form their own community.
Interesting.
And then other people who came here, Cape Verdeans, Azorians, lots of immigrants. We had a whole bunch of Irish immigrants after the potato famine, but not very many of them stayed. And of course, famously, Bob Mooney's ancestors did. But, sometimes when we hear the story about the wreck of the British Queen and how the Mooneys came ashore and refused to get back on a boat to ever go to the mainland, it sounds like they were the only Irish here. But in fact, there were at least 150 potato famine Irish on Nantucket when that happened, who took everybody in, saw everybody else off, and the Moonies stayed. But in the longer run, most of the Irish didn't stay here because there really wasn't any work. But there was a lot of empty housing on the island. So many people had gone, Nantucketers, immigrants, and so forth. And people from the Azores started moving in. So we developed a large Azorian population. They built their own hall, which was Alfonso Hall, and it became Father Griffin Hall.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, and then, we had immigrants from other places as well. So that was The Other Islanders. It was just a history of many people coming from all different places, contributing to making Nantucket what it is.
Okay, and when you say what it is, I have a question. Was there ever a point in Nantucket's past that is similar to where we are today? Where the
Well, I think, in the heyday of whaling, it had a year-round population of 10,000. It was population dense. It was very cosmopolitan. People from all over the place, people coming and going. When I grew up in Nantucket, I think we were coming to the end of an atypical period, because in the first half of the 20th century, there was a big depression. People were not coming to the island, and all the people who were going to leave had left. So the school assumed that all the kids in each of the grades was native born. And we sort of thought that was the norm for Nantucket, but actually I think it was far from the norm. And then, of course, we began to grow again.
Right. You've written, your book Fest is coming. You've written a new book.
This book is also one that took a long time. This is a 20-year book.
Oh.
I inherited a collection of old Nantucket recipes in 1994. And that was the concept. And from concept to product has been 20 years.
Just recipe? What makes them distinctively Nantucket, though?
Oh, well, my aunt was the founder of the North Shore Restaurant, which is now American Seasons. She loved food. I think she and I share this thing about, we read cookbooks the way some people read murder mysteries. We say, what's going on here? How's this going to turn out? And so she actually left me quite a big collection of recipes, but within it there was a sub-collection of old Nantucket recipes from the 1800s, some from the 1700s, which actually, for the most part, they don't work today because the ingredients are different. But they're a historic document. This is how Nantucketers in the past fed themselves with food that was necessarily local. You know, there's a lot of chowder and a lot of cranberries in here.
Why the North Shore and not another side of the island?
Exactly what the publisher asked me. He said, why not the whole island? Why just the North Shore?
Yeah.
But what I'm writing about is this part right here, from Madaket Harbor to what was called the Great Harbor, just along the North Shore, and there's a reason.
Okay.
In 1659, the Macy family and a few other people landed on Madaket Harbor within Eel Point, and they sheltered on that harbor for that winter. And then more English settlers joined them, and they formed their settlement on the North Shore. And then Kapam Pond, which was their harbor, closed, and so they basically knocked their houses down and moved to the Great Harbor. So chronologically and geographically is a straight shot from Madaket to here. And they got here and they couldn't go any further. So then they formed this neighborhood here. And it's the neighborhood where I grew up. I know much more about this neighborhood than any other part of the island. I found out, I had these memories of stories people told. Because, you know, in a tightly knit neighborhood where everybody knows everybody else, you tell stories for a couple of generations, right? So I had these stories in mind, but they were fuzzy, and I would ask people, and I would go back in newspapers. One of them was, there was a story about why the intersection at North Water Street and Chester Street over by the Point Breeze Hotel, it's a funny-shaped intersection.
Yeah.
And they said, well, that was because there was a big accident. Maybe somebody got killed, we don't know, but there was a big accident. We don't remember the year. You know, big accident caused them to change that intersection. So I started trying to talk to Bob Mooney. He said, my dad was driving. Aha. Bob, what year was it? He didn't know. Did anybody get killed? Not sure. But I eventually teased it out that Bob Mooney's dad, who became eventually chief of police, Mooney, was a teenager. And at the end of the summer season up at the Seacliff Inn, which has since been demolished, but people do remember it, the women on the staff, to end the season, they went on a hayride. Big cart full of hay, drawn by horses, young Robert Mooney driving it, and coming down
The
Cliff
Seacliff
Road.
now was on Brant Point?
No, the Seacliff Inn was up here on Cliff Road.
Oh, it was on the, okay.
Coming down the hill on the other side here.
Yeah.
The women were being very raucous. They were clanging a big bell, and they scared their own horses. The horses broke into a trot. Mooney couldn't control them, and the whole thing slammed into the curb at the foot of the hill, where there was a very sharp turn at that point. A lot of people got hurt. Nobody got killed.
Okay.
It then took the town about 15 years, in typical Nantucket fashion, to actually acquire the land, move a building off of it, and widen the intersection so it wouldn't happen again. And in the meantime, people were constantly writing angry letters to the newspaper saying, we call this dead men's turn. When are you going to do something about it? And eventually they did.
That's good.
So that was fun to research. That's the sort of thing I really enjoy doing, getting the thread of something and then finding out.
So does the book takes place throughout different years of North Shore's history?
The book starts with the people out in Madaket.
Yeah.
And the first settlers and the Wampanoags who were here, it was a cooperative venture. They dug the Madaket ditch. And people said, well, why did they do
What's that?
It's a waterway that connects Madaket Harbor with Long Pond. And they said, well, why did they do that? And to create a herring run. There are natural herring runs on Cape Cod, but there wasn't one here. And the Wampanoags really didn't have the means to dig anything like that until the English showed up with metal tools. So then the English and the Wampanoag cooperated to dig the ditch so that they could catch herring on the incoming spring run and eels going out to sea. And the town maintained it. There was always an item in the town budget right up well into the middle of the 20th century for maintaining the ditch.
Where is it? Where was the ditch? So if you drive along the Matticat Road,
if you go out Matticat Road to the second bridge,
yeah,
where the crabbing is on, that's where the Matticat ditch enters Long Pond. And it hasn't been used as a herring run lately because the state has a moratorium on taking herring. It was supposed to be a 5-year moratorium, but the stock didn't rebound, and so now it's an open-ended moratorium. And people are thinking that if they ever lift it, nobody will be left who remembers how to do it anymore.
Sure.
But, until fairly recently, that was something people did.
Okay, so from the beginning of when the settlers first came, up until when does this book take place?
Well, pretty much now.
Okay.
I mean, my aunt founded the restaurant during World War II, and it mentions how it eventually passed into other hands and is now American Seasons. We talk about a cooperage on Chester Street that became a bicycle shop and now is gone, and the Point Breeze Hotel that became the Gordon Folger Hotel and now is Nantucket Hotel and Resort.
Right.
So yeah, we're right up to the here and now.
So, as far as history goes, and before I say goodbye to you, how do you feel about the changes that are happening here on the island? And I mean, with all the history that you've looked back at, how would you define it, and how do you feel about it?
During the years when I was away, and I really only would come home for something that happened in the family, either something nice like a wedding, but more often somebody was sick or had to bury somebody, and I'd come home and people would just be deploring the changes, and they say, "Oh, isn't it awful? Oh, isn't it terrible?" And I would look around and think, how wonderful that it's so much the same. I didn't suffer from homesickness when I was away, but I was always really pleased to come back. And there are some positive things that have happened, because when I was growing up, there were a lot of derelict buildings with the roof falling in. Now, I think I can count on the fingers of one hand the ones that I'm aware of still. People with deep pockets have saved and restored buildings that were going rack on ruin. I think that's a good thing. The town is prettier than ever. We have developed a real preservationist attitude, which I think is to the good. Not only preservation of buildings, but preservation of our environment. We're much more environmentally conscious. And we may debate it a lot, but the debate itself is a healthy thing.
Oh, definitely.
And, this picture on the cover is an example of how preservation didn't used to happen. This is not the Jethro Coffin House. There was another house right next to it up on Sunset Hill. And in 1927, when they restored the Jethro Coffin House, they demolished this house for material to restore the Jethro Coffin House. That wouldn't happen today. Absolutely would not happen today. We would have maintained, I'm sure, the entire built environment, 2 houses and their outbuildings, and it would be a more interesting environment. But at that time, they just said, worthless old building, knocked it down in 1927 after it stood up there for 200 years, and forgot about it. Totally forgot about it. So one of the things the book does is it brings it back.
Wow, that's terrific. Well, I want to thank you. It's been very interesting to talk to you.
Well, thank you.